All right, guys. So here we are. This is a brand new Hyperdrive pan car build. This car is going to be ran at the paved oval at the ERC, which is the Easley RC complex located in Easley, South Carolina. The track is behind the Hobby Connection. And this is a full and new build. I'm putting these together for a new racer that's joining us. Billy is his name, and Billy, I greatly appreciate you coming to me and allowing me to build this car, this complete setup for you for the channel. I don't normally do builds like this. I'm a relatively quite a busy guy as it is, but so again, actually doing builds, I don't generally do that. But I try to help out whenever I can, and especially new racers, because that's one thing that we as RC racers, competitive RC guys, should do. You know, we should be able to help out the new guys coming into the sport, the new people coming in the sport, kids, women, men, I mean anybody that's interested in it, and we should be more helpful to that new crowd looking to come into it. I know some tricks for the pan cars that a lot of the newer guys aren't going to know. There's a huge learning curve into all this. So I agreed, and that's what we're going to do. And I want to give you an overall shot of everything that takes. Now, Billy is starting out from scratch, brand new racer. He has nothing. This is his first hobby grade RC race car. So he had to invest in everything. I've talked about this in some of my previous episodes, talking about, you know, it can be, you can spend as little or as much as you want to get into it. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly how much all this costs sitting in front of me, but I will tell you that Billy went the route of getting everything brand new. So whenever Billy reached out to me, he says, I want to get a lot of the necessary items up front and early so he can tune and progress through the different stages that we race with at Easley. We start out with the 8-second breakout truck, then the 7.5-second breakout car class, and then we go into the 17.5 Pro or 17.5 Monster Lock, whatever you want to call it. So Billy chose, he asked my opinion on some cars as well. I like the Hyperdrive Spec 7. That's what both of my cars are, my 17.5 Pro car and my breakout truck. But Billy did say, I want to be able to tune this. So I recommended to Billy, hey, you want to get a good spring kit. You want something that you're going to be able to tune with and swap out springs. We needed some spacers for the front end and these aluminum caster blocks. These are not really a necessity, but they are an extremely helpful tuning accessory for these pan cars. And if you look here on the box, they do come with them, but they're the plastic ones. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys like it is. These things are trash, in my opinion. I know that there's several racers out there that race them and get along with them fine. That's fine. But in my opinion, you got to do too much work to get these things to work the right way. And like, for example, even the pin that you have to run through there, I've had them where it's been so tight, you've got to ream out the hole or you bend the pins trying to get them in there. Major pain in the tail, so they're trash in my opinion. I always get rid of them. And there's several different pan car front ends out there available. There's Pemberton, there's GFRP, there's KSG, all this stuff. But one of the classic methods is you take the standard stock front end setup, you get rid of those plastic caster blocks, and you bolt these on in its place. These are a lot easier to tune with, they're a lot easier to deal with, so I highly recommend these. So I just want to throw that out there. But again, Billy being a brand new driver, he wanted to go ahead and get everything new and fresh. And that's great. But you don't have to go that route. You can get used. And in fact, if you're local, I'd even suggest checking out Speedway Motorsports. John Norman, he builds and repurposes cars and sells them for a really good deal. So you can get a car from him used and for a good price to be able to get on the track going. Now, I am really big into, and you guys heard me say on my channel several times, support your local hobby shop. And that's exactly what Billy did. And we should support our local hobby shops. But I'm just letting you guys know, you don't have to go brand new, but you can go brand new. And that's completely up to you. But to give you a rundown of what Billy's got to get us going here, okay? We've obviously got our Hyperdrive Spec 7 car kit, and we've already got some upgrades to go on that said car kit. the tuning springs, some front end spacers, and aluminum caster blocks. He's going to start out running the 8.0 breakout truck class. And so with that, we've actually got these CRC track magnet wheels. This is what all of us guys are running in the 8.0 breakout truck class and the 7.5 breakout car class. Fantastic tires. We can't run them in the 17.5 class. That class is way too fast and typically has been blowing the belts out from these tires. So he's got a brand new set of tires, brand new car kit. He's got a brand new Spectrum DX5C radio, a brand new Hobby Wing setup, and this is the XC Run 21.5 motor and a brushless motor with the Hobby Wing XC Run speed control. Receiver, I don't know if this came with it or if this is a spare one. I'll find out whenever I start the build. We got our Motive battery and our charger. So everything that you see here will get the car pretty much ready to go on the track. And if you're asking where Billy's race body is, he still has that currently. I'm going to be getting that from him soon so I can pre-mount it to the car for him. But he was waiting for a vinyl guy to do some stuff for him on that. But with that said, if you're starting out scratch, or even if you are a RC racer of another sort, you're probably already going to have this and maybe that and a charger. But this is generally what you're going to be looking at if you're going to start out racing the pan cars. And what we're going to do in this video is I'm not going to bore you with the complete build as far as, like, you know, putting this here and threading it down, but I'm going to go over some of the important areas of the pan cars. Okay, but long story short, I am going to show you how we're going to turn all this into one of these. This is my breakout truck, and again, this is a Spec 7 car. I've shown you guys this car on the channel before, but just give you another rundown. Whenever this is all said and done, it's going to look like this. And we are, now that I open up the body, I realize we are missing 2 more components. They haven't arrived yet. Billy, whenever he wanted me to build this setup for him, he wanted me to get a couple more items that he needed to go racing. One of those was we got a servo on the way for the build, and we've got a transponder, a lap counter on the way for this build as well. But those are the, I believe, last 2 components I'm waiting to come in. So we'll be able to get Billy's car set up and ready to go. So again, all this is going to turn into this. So with that said, guys, let's get to it. All right, so we got everything put away other than the car kit. We got to get through this first. So what do you need to build the car kit? Well, there's going to be several little tools. You're going to need some small, you know, I got my little Allen wrenches here, my trusty kit there. I've got some small pliers and things like that. I'm going to need some other tools I don't have laid out, but we'll get to that as it comes up. But with that said, you know, let's just open up the box and see what Hyperdrive gives us whenever you get one of these brand new cars. So one thing that you're going to get is it's 2021 now. So instead of them, it's cheaper to put your directions on a disc and send it to you than to print it out on paper. So that's modern times for you. And then we got a checklist. So this is where they go through and they basically highlight everything, make sure it's in the box. That way there's no parts being left behind. So it's cool they do that. And this is something good to hang on to as well, guys, because if you break something, guess what? These have all your part numbers on here as well. So if you break this part, you can go here. If you lose this, you can go look here, so on and so forth. So real good thing to hold on to. So whenever you open it up, this can look a little overwhelming, okay? So here's the main chassis plate. We got our cross and shock tower, front bumper, and then there is a whole bunch of other stuff in here. And if you've never built one of these before, it can indeed feel a little overwhelming, okay? So we got, you know, the motor mounts, the rear pod, things of that nature. And let's see here. You know what? Shout out to you, Hyperdrive, the fact that y'all actually included body posts. Because I built 2 Spec 7 kits before this, and this was not in my kit. So either you guys started adding this recently, which is awesome on your part, or I got shorted on the last time. So Hyperdrive, if you're watching this, thank you. But you owe me a set too. But anyway, so we've got the rear axle and the differential, a bearing kit. In here, we got our front end parts. We got our lower arms, upper arms, caster blocks, steering servo mount, all the little caster pins, things of that nature. Rear ride heights, and that's what those other shims were you saw earlier in the video. Those are actually for the front ride heights. We got our center shock mount. We got our T-plate and our little pivot ball system for the T-plates and our rear pod spacers. We got our center shock. We got both side shocks. We've got some lube or grease. And we've got the hardware kit. And Hyperdrive does include some basic springs to put in the car kit. If I remember correctly, I found that these were too hard for the side, and this may have been too. I think this one may have been okay. I think these were too hard in my opinion for running paved oval anyway. But that's going to give you a quick rundown of everything that we have in here. So now that you know what it is, we'll just kind of start throwing some of that back. So let's get to it. Let's go ahead and start opening our first bag with the chassis plate, and we're going to get some things going. And if I hadn't said it already, I do want to give a shout out to Team Hyperdrive. You guys, the way you package this stuff up, have all your hardware in one bag and certain components in another, good job on that. So we got the chassis plate out, the cross brace hardware, the front bumper, you know, kind of going to go through and get all the things that we're going to start building kind of situated first. One of the key things anytime you're building a kit, especially a kit, and this is actually going to be a more simple kit compared to, say, like if you were building a off-road kit or a touring car kit or something like that, you know, this is going to have less pieces. But you want to be as organized as you can, and and we'll talk about that more as the video goes on. But right now, I'm just going through and getting ready to get all the hardware ready, and we're going to start go ahead and getting everything bolted up and put together. Now what I'm doing right here is, you didn't see me put it on there, but I'm actually using a CA glue or a super glue and putting it on a Q-tip, and I'm going to go around the outer edge of the entire chassis. Whenever these things come off the machine, they don't do this at the manufacturing site, and they recommend it, and I've been doing this for years. You just get some super glue or CA glue, put it on a Q-tip, and then just go all the way around the chassis. Any of the chassis plate components, you want to do that. And if you're asking, well, what does that do? It keeps the chassis from splintering and peeling off from the layers over time if you take impacts and things of that nature. So here we're going to go ahead and get the front bumper going. Going to get those screws out, part of the hardware kit, and we're going to go ahead and get these started and going on here as well. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of high-speed stuff here because, you know, I don't want to bore you sitting there watching me run everything down. But I want you to see the process. You know, there's a paved oval's growing, carpet oval's growing. A lot of my local RC's growing in general. It's growing really rapidly around here. So there we go. We got the bumper on. And so I just want to go into detail. You know, I've done some other builds on the channel. I thought covering a pan car would be great as well. So what I did here is I got a glass bowl. I'm going to put all my small hardware in. I'm going to be able to know what it is. You know, the manual that you can print off or put on a thumb drive. It tells you what sizes you need and things like that. So I'll know what they are. So here we go. You know, I got just the actual hardware bag, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in there too. I know what sizes go where. I've got the manual next to me, and this is actually the third Hyperdrive Spec 7 kit I've built. So pretty much already know at this point what to do. Several of the screws are the same size. But pay attention. There are some that are different. And what we're going to be doing now is throwing a little Nerf bar, a little sidebar on the right side of the chassis. And same thing there. We're just going to get them started, and then we're going to run those down. Going to speed up the frame rate here, to speed up the clips, so we don't bore you to death. But now that's on. So we're getting the main chassis plate built and put together right now. There's a lot to do in this car, and like I said, a pan car kit is not as hard as some other kits I've built. But there's still a lot of parts here, so you want to be detailed, take your time, make sure you're doing everything right. I am going to go over certain areas in the video where you might want to, not tighten something all the way down just yet, because go back and work it, kind of like if you were changing the tire on your car, right? Usually do like a crisscross pattern. I will touch on that as we're going. But now we're going to get the rear pod started. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start bolting on some of that beautiful red Hyperdrive aluminum on the bottom pod plate. And that side of the pod, the aluminum, is your rear axle housing, as well as your motor mount. And then we got the other side too. It's got another axle housing. You pop some plastic inserts in there for your rear ride height and things of that nature. But we're going to get all that aluminum on the bottom portion done. And there you have it. And we'll go back and add the top portion a little bit later. We're going to move on to another step of the build now. So here's the T-plate. This is a Hyperdrive, again, Spec 7. So this is a exclusive T-plate to this car. There was one point in time whenever almost you could, if you broke a T-plate, you could go get a T-plate off the wall, and they were pretty much all generic. But a lot of these later model cars that run T-plates, they are pretty exclusive to that one chassis. And I want to point out right here, we're going to deburr that spot. And what that is that is going to be the little pivot ball area for the T-plate. And this is one of those areas that we talked about earlier. You're not going to want to over tighten, and you're going to want to go in a crisscross type pattern, as you would, like I said earlier, if you were changing your wheel and tire on your real vehicle. So we're going to get that situated. Also, I just want to say I don't put anything in there in the little housings. Some people put graphite, some people put lube, whatever. I don't. And I'll explain why as we're going through this process. So we're going to get started. We're going to get a screw going. And I'm just going to run it in a little way, and then I'm going to start on another one. I'm going to run it on down, but I'm not going to wrench it down. I'm not cinching it tight yet. And the reason for that is, see, I'm doing a crisscross style pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run them down, and then I'm going to back them out a little bit until that the pivot ball can move freely inside of there. Over time, as the car is raced and that wears, it will become more free that way. So the next time I do a breakdown, clean, and build, I can run that screw in a little bit more. But again, if somebody tells you to put some graphite in there or some kind of lube or whatever, cool, whatever. Is there a right or wrong way to do this? It depends on who you ask, but that's my method that I'm just telling you there. So at that point, we got the T-plate pretty much ready. We're going to go ahead and mount it onto the bottom of the rear pod. The T-plate and the little pivot balls are moving freely. And if that's not officially called a pivot ball, I apologize, but that's what I'm calling it in the video. I don't have the manual in front of me while I'm doing the voiceover, but that's essentially what it is. It's a pivot ball. It pivots in those little cups and those little housings that you bolted onto the T-plate itself. Now, the T-plate and how and the direction you want those are important. So pay close attention to your manual and the direction that I have the T-plate and the pivot ball housing. You do want that sitting a certain way. If you flip it the other way, it's either not going to fit at all, or you're just going to have it bound up where it cannot pivot. So we put some spacers on there before we got the T-plate on. Those were the little the red aluminum spacers underneath. So we're going to run those down. And we can go ahead and cinch those up. So now we got the T-plate up, and those little risers just get the T-plate up off a little bit. And it's gonna mount to the chassis, which you'll see here shortly. It'll make that pod plate even with the chassis. So now we're gonna go ahead and get ready to secure it to the chassis itself. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You line it up with that rear piece there. It's going to line it up on that front section of hole too. They do make different size T-plates for this car. On all my personal cars, I'm running the stock kit T-plates. I have spare T-plates the same way. So I'm just going to run a screw and a nut in there, and then check it out. And then what you want to do is right there, you want to rock that out and back and make sure that thing can move free, like we talked about in several other of my videos. Friction and binding is your biggest enemy whenever you're building a RC race car. So you want everything to move as freely as you can without it having slop. And I hate to go ahead and give you fair warning, you're going to hear that a lot in this build. There's several areas of the car that we're going to talk about that in, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to get the shock tower or cross brace ready to go on the car. And on this particular model car, we got these little red aluminum risers, and you're going to thread in. They are machined and threaded, so you're going to screw in through the graphite or carbon fiber section into those little uprights, and then those uprights are going to actually bolt directly onto the chassis plate. And so we're going to go ahead and get all those in and run through this real quick, get it ready for the next step, put it on the car. And again, take your time right here. This is another area that I wouldn't, tighten them all the way down just yet. I wouldn't cinch them down fully because they may not be perfectly square. We got to get them on the chassis plate next. So what you're going to see us doing right here. The direction of that cross member or shock tower is important. You can look at it how I have it in this video here, and you can also refer to the manual to make sure you have that in the correct direction. So from here, we're going to go ahead and get it started. And again, you see I'm not really cinching anything down just yet. But I am going through and getting all those screws placed so that the shock tower / cross brace is in there. So now you can see it installed. And again, I have not really run back and fully cinched it down yet. And if I don't cover that step, once you have it on the car, do that. Go back. Now you can tighten them down. You're good to go. So if I didn't do that already, just make note that once you have it on the plate, go back and, tighten them down all the way across on the bottom and on the back sides. So what we're doing now is we're going to be putting the little ball-headed type screws on there for the shocks. And I had it on the wrong side at first. I corrected that, moved it in. And you've got 2 adjustments on these cars for that, up and down. I generally run them up. I've been running them up. Yes, you can move them down. Is that a tuning thing? Yes, it is. And if you want to see that and hear more of an explanation of that, you can check out my Pan Car basic setup and tuning guide where we actually discuss some of that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get some more of these little ball studs in, and this is the upper portion of the rear pod that we're building now. This is the top plate for it. We're going to be putting in 3 of those little ball studs, and that is going to be for the side shocks and the center shock of the car. So we're going to go ahead and get those tightened up, and then the same way as before, we're going to go ahead and get that put on the upper section of the pod there. So we're going to get our hardware for that, get it lined back up properly, and we're going to run it down. And again, you're not going to see me really, torque anything down, cinch it down yet or anything like that because we've got, some more work. I'm going to go back through and do that shortly, go back and, put the final torque on all of it. And you do not want to do that aggressively. You can easily strip this out. We're dealing with aluminum. We're dealing with threading into, Delrin and plastics, things like that. You want to have it nice and tight, but you do not want to over tighten it. I've bought some used cars that people have. You'd swear they put red Loctite on. It's just ridiculous. So we also put the rear we also put the rear brace on the rear pod now, the little cross brace that goes on the back. And this is where I'm going to go back and go ahead and put my final torque on all those screws for that rear pod. And then again, we're just going to check movement. Everything's moving free. I could take that car and shake it, and that pod's going to move out and back, perfectly. So those are the areas that another area you want to focus on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and build our center shock mount to the chassis. And I myself, on two of my different Spec 7 cars, the way that thing is curved, and you've got some placement holes on where you can put it and tune with it depending on the length of your center shocks and things of that nature. You can also flip this shock tower around and have the curve facing one way or another. In one of my cars, I've got it facing the other way. One of my cars, I have it facing the way that it calls for in the directions. And some of that had to do with what I was wanting to do with just some tuning and length of my shock and things of that nature. But this one, we're putting it together as in the book. And it's also got another little ball stud there that we are going to thread on there. And that's for the ball cups that's going to be on the center shock to be set up. And again, if you want to know what location to run the center shocks and side shocks in, again, refer to my RC Pan Car Basic Tuning and Setup Guide. We talk about a lot of that, and I'll be sure to throw that link up in the description of this video if you haven't checked that video out. Going to be a lot of helpful information in there for the pan cars as well. So now we got, the rear pod on the car, the chassis plate solid, got the front bumper on, all that good stuff. So we are going to go ahead and begin the front end assembly. And again, you're going to want to deburr some areas and things of that nature. A knife may not be the best tool for the job. Kids, if you are watching this, either have your parents help you with this portion or use a different tool. All right, now right here we're going to be talking about these caster blocks. Okay, I got those red aluminum caster blocks, and we got the factory plastic ones. I am not a fan of the factory plastic ones because those little pins, you go in there, you got to do some work. They bend too easy. Try to get them in, it's too tight. Things of that nature. The aluminum ones, they drop right in. You got more adjustment. I run the 0 ones. As you can see, I threw the factory plastic ones to the side saying, yeah, they're junk. That's my opinion. A lot of guys still run them and like them, and that's fine. I like the aluminum ones. They go to bed easier. They're easier to deal with, easier to tune, in my opinion. You can get 0 degree, 5 degree, and so on and so forth. You can get adjustment with the aluminum ones as well. But I generally run 0s. But that's just my personal preference. I don't like the factory stock plastic ones again, pain in the butt in my opinion, but that's just on me. You'll have some other guys tell you that I'm wrong on that, and that's fine. I think some of the carpet guys still like to run a lot of the plastic ones too, and that's cool. I run paved oval. A lot of us paved oval guys really prefer those aluminum caster blocks. But anyway, we got we're pretty much getting the entire front end laid out on the table, getting ready to put it together now. We got the lower A arms, the upper arms. We've got, like the little cups, the pivot ball holders, things of that nature. We've got our front axles, kingpin, spring cups. We got all that. So we're going to go ahead and open the rest of these up and start getting these put together. So what we're doing here is we're going to go ahead and take that first. Again, that is a 0 degree red aluminum caster block. It's got a 3-hole adjustment on it. And we're going to go ahead and run those right in on those lower control arms. So we're going to get both sides done, and then we're going to be talking about some pretty critical areas on the front end build. Like I talked about earlier, friction and binding is one of your biggest enemies when you're building a RC race car. So, for example, I'm going to take my front kingpin there, and I'm going to run it out and through that axle shaft. Okay, we're going to make sure that thing can move through freely. Make sure that it can just drop right through, but there's no play in it. Okay, you may have to clean that up. Some of them come in, some of them, come in cleaned up. Some of them don't. There may be a burr in there you're going to have to go through, such as that one there. That was the other side, so there's a little bit of a burr there. So we're going to have to actually clean that axle up. There's a couple ways to do it, but this is where it's going to be critical. Measure your kingpin to verify what dimension it is. You want to make sure you have the proper size bit. And then I'm going to go in gently and quickly, and I'm going to touch that up, run it in and out, and I'm just deburring it so that kingpin will go through. I'm not really opening that hole up. That is a proper size tool bit for this application. So I'm going to take that kingpin and look, it moves free, the burrs are gone, and that kingpin will freely drop right through that axle as well without having any slop. That's what you're looking for. Again, unnecessary binding and unnecessary friction is an enemy. Get rid of it. That's one of my biggest areas that, I can't help but say it repeatedly. I cannot tell you how many new people I've helped out. They go, my car's doing this or that, and I pick up their car and I move a suspension component on it, front, rear, whatever, and, you'll lift the arm up and it just stays there. It's binding somewhere. There's a lot of friction somewhere. And what we did there is we actually put the little turning knuckle on the front axle. And again, I just wanted to verify that kingpin is going to fall straight through there without any kind of issue, which it did. You want all this stuff to move as freely as you can, with as little friction and no binding. So that's the key there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be getting the upper areas set up. We've already got some of the little camber some of the little camber parts in, and we got the eyelets in, so the adjustable camber screws. So we got all that stuff in there. We're getting the little pivot balls in there for the front end as well. And again, I'm not really going to touch on how I'm spacing or how I'm running my front caster and this and that and the other in this video. If you want to see that and hear my personal opinion on that, how I generally set up my cars with that, again, refer to my Oval RC Pan Car Basic Setup and Tuning Guide. And again, that will be there will be a link in the description for this video, so you can reference that video as well. Lots and lots of helpful information there. But again, so right here, now I'm going to go ahead and start putting my little spacers on there, and we're going to go ahead and get that the upper control arm mounted to the caster block as well. Again, not going into detail here so much on that, just because I've got another 30-40 minute long video based on some of these basic setup and tuning methods, and this is just to cover the build. But we're going to go ahead and get that on, and going to get it secured. And again, which hole, we cover that in the basic setup tuning guide as well. Things that I like to do and what you might want to do differently if you want to try something, things of that nature. But again, right now we're just trying to get this car together for Billy and taking you through that process. So we're going to run it through, and guys, those little bitty E-clips, they can be a pain, but pay attention. You will lose one in a heartbeat, and if you don't have extra, you're going to be in trouble. That's one reason why I like to work with a solid white work area. I've got some old white paper on a roll I'll lay down, because if you drop something, you can find it easy. If you got dark carpet or a dark floor, it's going to be hard to find those clips, because those clips are usually either sometimes they're stainless or like a chrome color. Sometimes they're like a bronze color or even black, and they're very easy to lose in dark colored flooring and such. So, and I just use those little long needle nose to kind of get that little final clasp to drop in. And again, see, I'm going to pick up and drop that upper control arm. It does it freely, frictionless. That's what you want. I said it 100 times, guys, that you may be tired of me here. You may be tired of hearing me say it, but again, friction and binding is one of your biggest enemies with these things. So what we're going to do here is we're putting the little spring cups on the front springs. I'm going to be checking the front end for that next, running the kingpin back through, and going to get that set up. Now, I am going to give you a warning about this. Depending on what wheels and tires you're running, depending on what ride heights you're going to be running, depending on what kind of front end you're going to be running, you may have to play with some of the spacing on that front end, the kingpin side of things. I don't like to run a lot of preload on the front springs specifically. So you may have to play with that a little bit with the spacers. The kit comes with plenty of spacers to do that. If you need to get more, because that's pretty critical. Especially if you're running in the breakout classes, especially locally at ERC or even some of the carpet tracks where you're running the CRC tires. Fantastic tires. But I've noticed that you generally have to play with your spacing or do a little cleanup on the inside of the wheel to keep that kingpin from rubbing on those particular tires. That's from my experience. I've had some other local racers tell me the same thing. I'm just sharing that with you now to be aware in case you run into the same thing, and you would know what to expect. You'll need to play with some of your spacing there or clean up the inside of that wheel a little bit. But same as earlier. Going to run that in with the needle nose, get that clasp in, and then I'm going to do a check. I'm going to push up on that, make sure everything moves freely. There's no binding. Again, you don't want any kind of binding. You want to move nice and free. And we're going to double check. Yeah, so everything's pivoting good. The spring was working good. I'm feeling no binding, so that front end is ready to go. So at this point, I've already did the other side. I just want to kind of break it down and go into more detail on that one specific side. But now we're going to set up our spacers to basically for your front ride height of the chassis. And if you want to know some more information on that, again, refer to the basic setup and tuning guide. That'll be in the link. That will be in a link in the description of this video. But we're going to be going with the particular size you see here for this particular platform. I like to get them as low as you can without rubbing, but in some instances I run them up a little bit higher depending on the class, depending on many variables there, okay? But this is the particular setup that I'm running on this. I'm pretty much building Billy's breakout truck just like how mine was set up. So, which it ran fantastic. So I'm going to just be moving that same basic baseline setup over to his car, and then he can tune from there as he wishes. So we got that left side front end on the car. It's pretty much good to go. And then we're going to do the same thing, go the same way to the right side. You can run a different size spacer depending on what your car is doing with handling, what you want it to do, and things of that nature. I think that's even more common in the carpet world in some instances. But we're going to run the same size spacers on the left and the front, on the left and the right on the front of this car. So here you have it. We've got a lot of the car already built here. This is going to be a wrap on episode 1. This is already going a little after 30 minutes or so. So this is going to be a wrap for phase 1. Phase 2 video, if you're looking for it, it's up and available now as well. I went ahead and released them both at the same time, even though it's a 2-episode series, but I did that for timing reasons and to help speed up the loading process, because the upload of a video longer than 40 minutes is just ridiculous with my internet speed. But anyway, that was it for video 1 of a Hyperdrive pan car build tutorial. And make sure you want to see where this goes. Make sure to check out the episode 2, which is available right now as well. And if you're having a hard time finding it, look at the description of this video. I'll have the link for episode 2 in there as well. But guys, I greatly appreciate it. I hope you check out episode 2 to see how this build wraps up. But I do appreciate each and every single one of you. Appreciate the continued support. And I'll see you guys in the follow-up continuation of this episode.